Today, we become legends.
So it's been a while since I updated the top 3 gods for every role, as I wanted to let the meta settle for a while after mid-season before making one. With a huge change like removing boots, the meta is flipped on its head and what is good in the first week of the patch might not remain good a few weeks in, so to avoid this video becoming obsolete in a few weeks, I wanted to wait on this one. But now I feel like the meta has settled substantially and the standouts for each role have definitely emerged, so let's jump right in. As always, these videos aren't just my opinion, they're a combination of SPL stats, top level rank stats, tier lists from prominent creators, as well as a splash of my own take on the meta as well, in order to give you the best and least biased view of the current meta. If you're looking specifically for my own biased take on the meta, that's what my tier lists are for. Quick note that the picks within each role aren't in any order, but let's just jump straight in with the mid laners. So first up, to no one's surprise, it's Morgan Le Fay. She's a new release and hasn't received anywhere near enough nerfs to bring her down to balance in my opinion. She's performing well basically everywhere at the moment. She has massive damage, great CC, surprisingly good survivability, and of course, insane range. Aside from her movement ability, she has literally everything you could want from a mage and is definitely one of the top mid laners right now. Keeping with the theme of new gods, we have Tiamat as the second top mid laner. A similar story to Morgana here in that she's a somewhat new release that hasn't received the necessary nerfs just yet. With effectively 11 abilities, Tiamat has the most flexibility out of any mage, and it's extremely hard to play around all of those options when the Tiamat player knows her well. That is the one issue with this one though, she's a bit harder to play than your typical mage, so if you don't know her that well, maybe try one of the other two on this list. And finally we have Persephone. This final spot definitely had contention with the likes of Raijin, Baba Yaga, and one of my personal meta breakers right now, Zhonghui, but I think overall Persephone is the strongest. The rework made her so much easier to play while not really turning down her strength that much. She got like 50% easier to play but only lost 20% of her power level, meaning in general she still performs extremely well. The new plants are both easier to deal with and harder to deal with at the same time, and her ult barely got touched, which is by far the best part of her kit. I definitely recommend Persephone for mid right now. Alright, moving on to supports, let's get the elephant out of the room. We've all seen the meteoric rise of Fafnir right now and he absolutely has to take one of the support spots. Fafnir has all the essential tools a support needs, and his signature coerce works insanely well with the current meta ADC gods and builds, as well as some junglers right now. Being able to put your 2 on a hunter that has Silver Branch and not worry about any overcapping or any of that nonsense is really nice, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Fafnir is also pretty easy to play, not the easiest support by any means, but manageable for sure. Just make sure you're utilizing his insane objective burn and you're good to go with this guy. Support number 2 is one that I think has literally taken a spot on this series since her release, and that isn't changing now. Yeah, it's Yemoja. What can I say about Yemoja that hasn't already been said? She just has everything. If you can play this god to a solid level, just pick her anytime she's not banned. Great CC, great damage, healing, walls are really strong right now because a ton of the top picks have no jumps. Just pick her if you can play her, that's all that needs to be said. Our final support had a little interjection from me as it was quite hard to decide on a final slot. For me though, I think Terra is super strong right now. Honestly, Terra's never really bad. She has one of the best ults in the game, great initiation, some healing, decent lane pressure, she's just really solid. The other picks I considered were Sobek, who I also think is great right now and is another one that's generally never bad, as well as Ymir. Moving on though, let's talk about those ADCs. This is probably the role that has undergone the most change since mid-season, and nothing embodies that better than the rise of Artemis. Of course, the main reason Artemis is so strong right now is her great use of the new meta ADC builds. Of course being the bow spam builds with Silver Branch. Art has one of, if not the best attack speed steroid in the entire game in terms of numbers. I believe it gives 80%, and she can easily hit 40 or more Silver Branch stacks when she pops her 2 with the new builds, giving her insane power. Ichival being meta also helps out her early game a lot, which is really nice because it's one of Artemis' biggest problems. She's also received buffs over and over for like the last couple of years, and this combined with the new builds that she uses and no boots, meaning she spikes harder into the late game where she shines, she's just very dominant right now. My next ADC is here for a fairly similar reason, and it's Rama. Similar to Artemis, he has an amazing attack speed steroid and makes great use of the new meta ADC builds. Aside from that, he's the same old Rama. Really strong ultimate for picking off kills or buying time, such as to escape the previously mentioned Yemoja ult, and spoiler, Odin and Gilgamesh ultimates too. He's just very strong, a very good consistent pick right now. The final ADC spot is less clean cut, with Danza, Anher, Heimdallr and Cherno all being very good right now. I think there's very little separating these guys at the moment, so I'll interject my own opinion here and say that I think Danza just edges out slightly for me. This god just has things that hunters shouldn't really have, it feels like. His CC is amazing and his mobility is out of this world. The only thing you have to worry about really with Danza is the amount of obnoxious walls in the meta right now with your Moja, Odin, Gilgamesh, and even occasionally Ymir. He has no way to escape those, so it can be rough, but other than that, he's extremely solid. Moving into junglers, probably the single most obvious pick of the entire list, we have Gilgamesh. This character is just absolutely crazy. I would stick my leg out there and say he's the best god in the game right now. Absolutely absurd damage and CC, the dropkick displaces you, stuns you, and does half your health. The ult is insane for lockdown, especially on some of the low mobility meta gods right now like Artemis. And he's not just a one and done with the dropkick either, he can still put out really good sustained damage with his one and maybe animosity if you want to go that route. He also works quite well in solo, but sees far more play in jungle right now, so that's where he sits for the list. The god's just insane, and I think you know that, so let's move on. So for jungler number 2, we actually have another warrior, one of my personal favourites that I pretty much always put high on my own tier list, but is also performing really well in the meta right now, and that's Erlang Shen. Erlang's damage output is just completely insane and it always has been. He loves the no boots meta and Ichival being super broken, and despite having no CC immune ult and no jump to escape common abilities in the meta, I still think he 100% deserves a spot on the list for jungle. So I would love to actually put an assassin on the list for jungle, so I'll give Serket and Fenrir honourable mentions as strong junglers right now, but I have to give the final spot to a third warrior, and that's Osiris. I think this is the first time in the series where every top jungler has been a warrior, but that's just the meta right now. Osiris works great with a lot of the strong items at the moment like Ichival and Stonecutting Sword, plus mannequins in the jungle. Osiris works great in solo as well, but similar to Gilga, I would say he sees a little bit more play in the jungle right now, and I don't want to duplicate gods across multiple roles, so jungle is where he's going to reside on this one. But let's move on to those solo laners, shall we? So the first and definitely strongest solo right now is Odin. He's really just rocketed into the meta lately and is being banned almost every single game. He works great with the new meta solo builds and just dominates at the moment. A lot of top characters don't have a jump and it's just a death sentence if they get caged with no way out. Odin is just insane right now. He can also play other roles like jungle and maybe even support, but solo is by far his strongest role right now. Solo laner number 2 is Kukulkan. This guy is one of the best abusers of the post-boots builds in solo, with Mystical Mail being great on him since he already liked Mystical even before the changes. Not to mention his great use of the tier 2 Rangda stat that's still very popular in solo right now. His lane pressure is some of the best in the game, so especially for random ranked games, this guy can actually carry by just pressuring lane early on and rotating with a big lead to take objectives, and he even has okay late game. A giant AoE knockup is nothing to laugh at. For the final spot, there's a few gods that could go here. Of course, as I mentioned, Osiris is great and Gilga works too, but they're in jungle for this list, so in terms of pure solos, Bellona, Cthulhu, and Arthur are all very strong right now and are on similar power levels in my opinion, so I'll give this spot to Cthulhu just so we don't have 6 warriors of these 15 picks. Cthulhu is just a solid all-round safe pick for solo. He does great in lane, it's very hard to die on him, you can play him aggressive or more defensive depending on your preference. He has great disruption and even decent damage in late game teamfights, and is one of the best gods for sieging in the entire game in my opinion. Cthulhu's just really great right now, but of course, as I mentioned, there are others that could have taken this spot for sure. But that's it for the top 3 gods for every role after the boots removal in Smite. Hopefully this helped you out in what to ban or pick or just what to look out in general for your games, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out you nerds.